go, folks. Next speaker is Carlson Chambliss, 106 years of Hawaiian currency from scrip to World War II.
Okay, well, that I think was actually Peter Huntoon's embellishment, I call it. Be sure to see my exhibit in the other room there, where I illustrate most of that, including, I confess, a fair number of reproductions of the National Bank sheets, which do not exist. There are no known sheets of national banknotes of Hawaii. They've all been, well, large size mostly don't exist in any form. Okay, well, I'm going to go sort of reversed order. I expect most of you are more familiar with the Hawaii notes of 1942 to 44 than with the earlier material. You do have national banknotes from Hawaii, and of course you have notes from Hawaii when it was independent, most of which, however, exist only as reproductions and as proofs and things like that, not as issued notes. Okay, well, we have Pearl Harbor. Rather soon thereafter, the Department of Defense and the Treasury Department and whatnot got the idea of setting up special currency for use. There was a real thought of Hawaii being invaded. It wasn't certain what would happen in World War I. We declared war on Germany, but bear in mind there wasn't a lot of actual combat, and it started in North Africa against the Vichy French, actually, and that was Operation Torch. And they decided American currency might in quantity fall into Axis hands. We'd better have some special currency that could be quickly repudiated. The so-called North Africa notes, by the way, were used in, well, Morocco, particularly in Algeria, but then more so in Italy. They were never used in France and Belgium. There they were carrying AMC currency. Hawaii was used for civilian purposes. In Hawaii, it was also used in various places in the Pacific Theater. Joe showed us an AC, that's one of the scarcer blocks. That one, I think, may have been carried in the jungles of the Solomon Islands or something like that. It was a little, the condition left something. Okay, now, those are the numbers. I've had some conflicting numbers on the $10 star rate, but you can see the typical production. Hawaii stars are pretty rare. I do have a good holding of those. Those are the known, that's somewhat old information by Logan Talks, but you can see the number. The real rarity is the $5 1934A, which we'll see. Okay, now those are the backs. Now, there are a few error notes in which Hawaii does not appear, and also a few in which Hawaii is inverted. These are major errors of Hawaii. Both Hawaii and North Africa notes error notes are very popular with collectors, and even trivial gutter folds and trivial smudges and minor offsets sell for good prices that one would hardly pay any attention to if they were, say, $1 silver certificates or something like that. Okay, now what are we looking? We've got, okay, a PC is one of the normal blocks. We'll see the block. The FC was a very special series of notes done, only 12,000 made, of both North Africa, 12,000 each, but North Africa and Hawaii. These were sold, as far as I know, at the cash room of the Treasury. They never went to where they were supposed to go. I think the purpose was their sons and whatnot would be, in these locations, would be, say, we're using this funny money, and people in the home front wouldn't know what the funny money was. So the Treasury made the thing. Only 12,000 were printed, but the survival rate is high, and the average condition is high, too. That note, FC, we're talking historic notes, that is the first note I bought from Lynn Knight. It's choice uncirculated. I paid the enormous price of $11.95. I think we can say for a GemCU FC, he would pay me quite a bit more than that today. Now, you have in 5s and in 20s, but not 10s, 34, 34A. Hawaii was at a time when I think you're familiar with the mule notes, large and small numbers on the back side, usually referred to as micro and macro. Micro numbers are scarcer than macro numbers. So in the case of the 34s, the mules are more common. The the mules are more common. The non-mules are scarcer. In 34A, the normal are more, the non-mules are more common, and the mules are scarcer where they exist. They don't always. There's this is a full set of the normal. Now let's see. Here we go with stars. The really good one. This is from the Taylor family, so I got it without too much opposition there. Be sure to take a look at that note. It's better than the one that Heritage recently sold. It's in my Hawaii exhibit. That's my pride and joy on. There are about a dozen known. It's approximately the same rarity as the 1928 $1 star the silver that we heard, and the $2 United States note 1928 B star. All three of those have approximately a dozen each known. And they're the 10s and the 20s. Any of these, and strictly, most of those are more like very fine XF, but any that are strictly uncirculated bring quite healthy prices. Not that those would be free either. And you could see the ratios, so stars are not particularly common. Now this stuff was required between 42 and 44. Hawaii was basically a military dictatorship, as far as I can see, basically run by Chester Nimitz, who was giving all the orders to everyone out there. But we'll see where I think there was some other stuff that was in use. Okay, if you wanted, I did basically, I have 7 of the normal notes, non-star, the 6 stars. If you wanted to do a complete collection of Hawaii notes, 42, 44, non-errors, this is what your collection would contain. The two, you can see the FC has a very low printing, yes, but all of those went into numismatic. The survival rate is very high on those, and the condition, the average condition, is probably something like XF to AU or better. The two rare ones are the ZB and AC. Now those look a little odd, but if you notice how the numbering system went at that time for silver certificates and whatnot, they were, ZB and AC would be adjacent. Only 1 million each were prepared. The AC is especially difficult in high grades. Joe's would most definitely not qualify as a high grade one, I can see. And there's your star notes. But you notice these are 100 million blocks. So what was happening was these were just sandwiched in various blocks of $1 silver certificates. And some books like the Schwartz Lindquist catalog just put them in the regular. I think of them as quite distinct notes. They, after all, have brown seals and overprints. So although they were silver certificates, they're certainly not very normal ones. Now, these were all 5, 10s, and 20s were all Federal Reserve notes on San Francisco. And again, they were sandwiched in the blocks. The 10, although it does not exist in 34, you do have 2 block varieties there you could get, about equally common. There's nothing terribly rare in the normal, but now some of the, you can see their possibilities are for mule. There is an exhibit, not mine, but somebody else is doing an exhibit on number 204s. That is a so-called late finished plate. It has macro numbers on what should be a micro number plate. And he has one Hawaii in there. Let's see, for the 204, there are actually 2 possibilities. I see you could get either 34. The scarcest of all of these would be the one I have, the star note on the 34A. But anyway, that's the complete works if you wanted. And you can see, what about these different blocks of the $1? Only really the FC is special, but the ZB and the AC have huge premiums. The others are common enough, so although you can see the SC is the most abundant, the other blocks have relatively modest premiums, at least if they're like in, say, very fine XF or something. Okay, now that's Hawaii notes. Now of 42-44, wartime emergency. We go a little further back, we get to national banknotes. There was one big bank in Honolulu, which has had various names as we've seen. It was initially the First National Bank of Hawaii. It was changed to the Bishop First National Bank. Charles Reed Bishop, as we'll see, was not involved at all with the founding of it. He was a very firm supporter of David Kalakaua or Leo Kalani. He left for California in '95 after the revolution there, but they honored him with this. But you can see this one, it's now doing business as the First Hawaiian Bank, but it's a big bank, you can see. Now the others were all on the island of Maui, and we'll point out that you've had Kahului and Wailuku are close, but now Kahului, Lahaina, and Paia were eventually merged into the Bank of Maui. You notice it's not National Bank of Maui, so it lost a national charter. No national banknotes are known from Paia. That, by the way, is correct, but they're paying a lot of attention in Hawaii now to the glottal stop and pronounce. So it's not Paia, it's Paia. But 10,000 were sent out by the comptroller of the currency, but as far as I can see, they never enter circulation. They're completely unknown and probably were just simply returned to the comptroller of the currency for destruction at some point in there. Okay, now here we go on. This is the actual statistics. These come from Peter Huntoon, and we had the big bank had, you can see, when Series 1882 notes, various possibilities. The 10 is, there's one very peculiar thing about these. Now you notice the 10s are 10, 10, 10, 10 sheets, 4 10s, no 20. And the net result is Hawaii is the only jurisdiction out of all 51 that did 29 nationals that had no 20s. There are no $20 nationals from Hawaii. The others, well, you can see the statistics. There were red seals issued by 2 banks, yes, but none are known. Basically, all notes other than Honolulu are extreme rarities. There have been a few that have appeared, and here are the ones you can see. Here are the statistics on these. Now, that's mine, that's in the case over there. See it? That's about the most common of the Hawaii, but it's not free. I think I paid close to $3,500 for that one, and signed by these people. And that's the name. It was used on all of the large size. You then start getting, okay, now I've got, this is again, these are ones that Peter Huntoon supplied me. These are copies of the sheets that were laid out. That is the Hawaii Bank. That seems to be bonds. Okay, so that's a brown back then. There is the 50 and 100. None regret. There are, in fact, the 5, 10, and 20 do exist. Regrettably, no 50s and 100s. Not your brown back with the 2. There is a that's a or other securities. It could be either they had both value backs and date backs, and those do exist. That is a second charter, 1882 date back. Regrettably, none survive. And those are usually 50, 50, 50, 100. You could have an alternate there, 50 or 100. But now, this one, as I said, led to the peculiarities. This was issued along with the 5s, and this is now rather late in the game. It's an Elliott White signature, pardon me, Elliott and Burke signature, yeah, just before Spielman White. And it's 10, 10, 10, 10. They didn't start doing those. No 20 in there. And that led to this great peculiarity. And there's, regrettably, none of those exist, the 50s and 100s, sorry. You can only get them in cardboard proofs. Okay, now these are more or less contemporary. Charles Reed Bishop was a real Kama'aina haole who married Princess Pauahi, who was a direct descendant of Kamehameha I. She owned a very sizable holding on the island of Oahu. That's led to the Kamehameha schools and things of this sort. Charles Reed Bishop basically founded banking. Now, this is prior to the American firm. He was very loyal to the Hawaiian monarchy. The two, David Kalakaua was the king between 1874 and 1891. He was forced to sign in 1887 a constitution which he did not write, the so-called Bayonet Constitution, in which the the American sugar planters and whatnot reduced his powers significantly. His sister was Liliuokalani, who you can see lasted quite a bit longer. The revolution occurred in 1893 when these planters took over. Some controversy. For instance, the Democrats in the United States, like Grover Cleveland, for instance, were in favor of restoring the throne to Liliuokalani. That could have led to treason trials and things of that sort, because clearly they were engaged in treasonous acts at the time. Anyway, okay, now what happened to Charles Reed Bishop? In 1895, he went to California and did not return to Hawaii, being fundamentally out of sympathy with the Republic of Hawaii people, like Stanford Ballard Dole. But they've honored him, in effect, on the Bishop notes. Okay, now here we have some notes. There are 10 possibilities here because there are two different titles that were used. Getting all 10, I have seen a 100 type 2. That's a very rare note. Only 3 or 4 of those exist. You either have the Bishop First National Bank of Honolulu or the Bishop National Bank of Hawaii in Honolulu. This is the late. Now, why are there 10? Because the type 2, now you can see that's a type 2, also exists with the let's see, they first did the type 1 to type 2 change, so you can get the 5 and 10 with that first title. Oh, pardon me, wrong one. Okay, now, those are relatively common, we'll see from the statistics. The 50, this is one of the more available 50s you can get, I mean among nationals in general, 29 nationals. It is my feeling, now I don't have exact proof, but there were no 50s and 100s in the Hawaii notes. But my feeling is these circulated in the 40s. Why not? They're national banks on Honolulu. The Japanese had invaded, just repudiate them. They're easily identifiable. And particularly the 50 exists in some quantity. That's with the first title. These only exist. The type 1 have the so-called second title, which is that one. The type 2 have the third title, and those are very rare. I did see one in Memphis. Somebody showed it to me. 100. That would really stop you. There are 3 or 4 of those known. Okay? They're the census figures. You can see, and a surprisingly large number of the 50s, especially. But you notice why are there so few of the simple? Just look at the numbers printed. 680, it isn't exact, the survival ratio isn't too unusual here, but it's, there just were very few. Most were, and that's the possibilities. Getting all 10 of those would be for, and of course the thing that is most peculiar about Hawaii 29 nationals were the 20s. There aren't any. It's a little odd, but anyway, it's the only place. Okay, now here we have Maui, and let's just try this. Okay, now I can tell you that having been in Hawaii, I've been there several times. I've now been on 6 islands. I've done a huge amount with New Zealand and quite a bit with Hawaii. The area, Maui has probably had more changes than any of the other islands, I would say. Kauai is still, well, tourists, yes, but it's not, but Maui has grown more, because of course Oahu gets pretty crowded. It's grown more than, I would say, the Big Island. About 150,000 people live on the island now. Of course, it has Kalakaua, which is 10,000 feet. What has happened is recently Lahaina, which is over here, which is a rather sleepy, decadent town, say, 30 years ago or so, has become the chief tourist center. It's a real tourist trap. Parking there isn't all that easy because Wailuku and Kahului, which are here, are basically business towns without particularly a large amount of stuff of interest to tourists. And so they moved it. Now there's no place for docking a ship there, however, so they use tenders. They dock them between Lahaina and now Paia is here. This is a relatively small town. It did develop, but I don't think it ever actually issued national banks. This area down here has now become, some of it looks like Rodeo Drive in Beverly Hills or something. It's been very highly developed, but that's very recent. Kahoolaui would be out here, and that is uninhabited, but is now finally the native Hawaiians won out over the Americans, but they plan to do some restoration work there. Okay, here that's the Baldwin. Baldwin is a well-known Kama'aina Haole name of Kahului. This is now. There's one note of Lahaina. People would love to find, these started with red seals. They would love to find, but no Hawaiian, no 50, well, really no 50s and 100s large size seem to exist. There may be 100 of the 1880, of the date back series. No red seals, but Lahaina had them existing, I mean real ones. That's Paia, without the glottal catch on there, but they're using that now. And that, I don't think, those are unknown. I don't think they were ever actually issued. I think and that happened with a fair number of nationals. You would have these things printed, they would be shipped out, and they would be, but bear in mind they had to pay, remember, national banks had to pay a tax on their circulating issue. So there are reasons why a national bank might not want to circulate its notes. And this one, and then it got merged with two others there on the Kahului Bank and the Lahaina Bank. That's Wailuku. That was a little, those you can see, those are brownbacks here, like bonds. Okay, that's a brownback. Just saying, if it had the or other securities, we know it's a date back, but it's a brownback. Okay, oh, one more, Wailuku. Oh, okay, that's or other securities, so that's a date back. Okay, now let's go back a little further. The currency in Hawaii was rather complicated. They were working, they were using American, they were using Mexican a lot. They were very standard in using the real system. And we'll see, I'll show you some interesting things. I think half dimes and medial reales were used interchangeably in Hawaii. David Kalakaua, as king, decided to issue some money. Now, these were silver certificates. The money is good, but they were redeemable. You have to bear in mind that after, we all know about the crime of 1873, the fact that silver is no longer accepted at parity, at a 16-to-1 parity, I would say, with gold, The Mexican peso, therefore, would fall a bit in respect to the US dollar, etc. They would have been using a mixture. I see they say specifically silver coin. These were issued they were printed 1879 to 80. What are those? Those are actually souvenir cards done by the American Banknote Company from the original thing. You'll see a set of those in my display there. I believe there's some heavily canceled tens. No, the higher denominations don't exist in issued form. There are some earlier contemporary proofs, however, that were made back in the 19th century. Okay, they use the Hawaiian. Now, some of the words are rather different from, say, Hawaiian and Te Reo Maui. Oh, down in New Zealand is closely similar. They would use rau, for instance, 100 in New Zealand. It's haneri. And what are the large cents? They say hapa haneri on them, which is not 1 cent. That's a part 100 is what it is. That's on those large cents of 1847. Okay, and there's David Kalakaua on the note. That's the back of these things, and I think they were in the color of the note. Certificate of deposit. That's not a recent printing of the American, but that's an original from, there was a good collection of those sold by, I think it was by Stax Bowers not too many years ago. So a few of the proofs survive. As far as issued notes, forget it. Okay, now we have the revolution. Charles Reed Bishop leaves. Liliuokalani is momentarily imprisoned, although she was released. I would say, by the way, in Hawaii, I was in Iolani Palace, it was all decorated. I said, well, what's this for? It was David Kalakaua's birthday after I built the place. But looked it up, it was his 177th birthday. I think among most ethnic Hawaiians, David Kalakaua or Liliuokalani would be given the same respect that white traditional Southerners would give to Robert E. Lee, for instance, you would never want to say anything disparaging about Robert E. Lee, particularly in a place like Lexington, Virginia. Well, you won't want to do the same with. That sometimes is misdescribed. Oops, pardon me, I'm hitting the wrong button. This one, let's try this one. That is often misdescribed as Iolani. No, that's the Hawaii State Supreme Court. It was built in the early 1870-72 as a government building in general under Kamehameha V, and it's not Iolani Palace. Now, the American Banknote Company just came up with all sorts of, here we have some Western scene, although they didn't have a cattle industry there. They were obsessed with passenger trains. Well, they had a few little trains on sugar plantations on Maui, but there were certainly no big passenger trains running around in Hawaii in the late 19th century. That series is 1895. These are specifically paid in silver certificates. Now, the Republic of Hawaii people, Sanford Ballard Dolan and Lauren Thurston, and such, they were tied in sort of with the Republican Party of the United States and people like William McKinley. They were having a lot of problems, however, but the revolution actually occurred when Grover Cleveland was president, who was not wild on this idea and was thinking of restoring the place to Liliuokalani. So you have some interesting tie-ins, but you can see also gold versus silver, William Jennings Bryan. You notice those say payable in silver. The only one that exists in issued form, I think there are a few fives, but the other denominations do not exist. There are some proofs, originals. These are souvenir cards from souvenir cards that the American Banknote Company did in various times. Pardon me, that's this one. There's the 50 and 100, again, using, in fact, designs quite similar to the other notes, but this is now Republic of Hawaii. And they had the gold, we'll see some actual proofs. They were going to do a set of 5 souvenir cards, but they couldn't find the plates. The American Banknote Company couldn't find the plates for the 50 and 100. I'll show you what they did. But these designs are almost hilarious because you look at them, they're not Hawaii, of course, that's Latin America. Those were used on some Latin American, the vignettes on some Latin American notes that they were doing. So obviously a Latin American, these are both Latin American scenes. That is Iolani Palace, which was built by David Kalakaua in the late 1870s. And of course, it's very much still there, the only royal palace in the United States. Now, those they didn't, but now they had, I think, Stack's Bowers had a sale, and they did have, there's no possibility of any of these existing in initial form. These are specifically gold certificates. This one would have also certainly had the yellow-orange shading behind. And you would have had gold, American gold coins in circulation here, but you would have also had Hawaiian Kalakaua silver coins, along with maybe some others. But bear in mind, since silver was selling at a discount, these I think were specifically redeemable. One reason, of course, so few for survivors, this was good money. This isn't like Republic of Texas stuff that was that was hopelessly inflated from the very beginning when they issued it. This could actually be redeemed for gold or silver coins. And they did, however, they lost their validity as currency in 1904, and so essentially the survival rate became zero. They only exist as proofs, but they're the, now that's, okay, they're the backs. They used pretty much inscribed in English only, which, well, by the Republic, that's not surprising, but a little surprising on the Kalakaua currency. Rather similar design, and they've basically used the monarchy, still do the state seal, they use the monarchy seal. Okay, now let's go back further. We're going back in time. This is Ladd and Company, 1839. This is the earliest note from Hawaii. I think three are known. Looks like a typical state banknote of the 1830s. Not surprising, because it was, I don't know where it's printed, some Eastern, New York or Philadelphia or someplace. Inscribed entirely in Hawaiian. Rather interesting, yes, kala would be correct, not dala. It says dala on the Kalakaua, but they didn't have voice stops. In other words, Hawaii does not have voice stops, so the D, G, and B sounds aren't there. And so, and in one case it says Lima Kala, in the other case it says Kala Lima, $5 in other words. And this was issued by a sugar a firm. They had a refinery at a place called Kalakaua on the island of Kauai. And I think three have survived. That even has a corner out. We're talking very serious money there, because there were only three of these, like 20 grand or something for, or rather, well, quite typical state banknote, except this one is inscribed in Hawaiian. But of course, at this time, Hawaii was not affiliated with the United States. Now, I've been there, and that is the school of Lahaina. Well, first of all, Lahaina Luna means the Luna part in Hawaiian means upper, really, like Obersalzberg or something of that. So Oberammergau, as you would say in German. But this building is a historic site. This building was built in the 1830s. And a missionary school was founded, the Lahaina Luna School. Now, there's also a high school today in Lahaina Luna School, but that's a modern public high school. When you go up the hill above there, I can see there's a school bus back, so it's not that far back. But anyway, you find this historic building. And what did they do in that in 1843? They printed this stuff. They decided this is some of the earlier school currency. Now, as far as I know, this was halfway decent money. These are, in theory, in original form, collectible. Now, if you want to just make copies on your computer, if you go to Lahaina Lula School and hunt around for current, you will eventually get to a page that allows you to print out. I've got one in the sheet, but those are not great rarities. You can print out as many as you want on your computer. This says Hapalua, which would be part 2, or half, so that's a $0.50 of different sizes. Hapawalu, so that's an $0.125. This one I find particularly interesting. Yeah, it says hapa-umi. That could be part 10. It could also be half 10. In other words, 5. So it should be for 5 cents. But it was used for 6 1/4. 16 would be umama ono in Hawaiian. My feeling is, and it says 1/16 there, my feeling is in Hawaii, where they didn't have a lot of coins, the small silver, either the medio reales or the half dimes, were circulating the same, probably as a 1/16 of a dollar. Now, if you go to your red book, just to refer, U.S. coins, there were no half dimes coined by the mint between about 1803 or something and about the early 1830s. And you can always tell the fractional. You can see it in there. There was a time when the small change notes used the Spanish system, 12 1/2 cents and 6 1/4. And when they went over to the more American system of 10 cents and 5 cents, I think they just used the stuff interchangeable. There was a story of some British traveler in Hawaii. This is about 1870, and he had a meal in a Honolulu restaurant, and he paid using a gold sovereign, and was given in change a coin collection, literally. I mean, almost anything was passing out there until at least 1883, when Kalakaua came up with his currency. But they did these sort of, now there's, this one I find very interesting, because it has not only the 8 islands of the 8 real islands of Hawaii, but it has Molokini, Lehua, and Kaula, not necessarily in the right places, but those are tiny islets, but they're on there anyway. The location at Molokai is much closer to Maui and Lanai than it is to Oahu. They didn't put, but they got their latitudes about right. 19th degree, just about through the middle island. 22 about through Kauai. So it's pretty well done. And the Hapaha, so that'd be part 4. And this is Kolu Kanata, 3 cents for that one. Now, there was some counterfeiting. There are a few sheets of this that were done back then. These are, they're like 10 grand for the whole works. You'd have to be careful, because this is, but if you want to just make copies, you can do them on your computer from the thing. But anyway, how widely, as far as I know, that was actually, but it's not government. This is school money, basically, at this Lahaina Luna school. You had, in other words, in Hawaii, you can see you had various periods. Basically, once the annexation occurs in 1900, both the coinage, the Kalakaua silver coinage, and the notes of either the Republic of Hawaii or the monarchy ceased. They lost their legal tender status in 1904, and then, of course, you did have the national banknotes, as we've seen. But in World War II, you had the special currency, the emergency currency that was put in for that. If you go before, say, 1880, basically anything went, mostly coins. I mean, you can see there was very little paper, because that 1839 Latin Company only was designed for his sugar mill, and the school currency was basically designed for the Lahaina Luna School. Usually I run right to the last moment, but Joe Bowling did it with his. I don't know. Are there any questions? But by all means, do see my exhibit, which shows some of the same stuff, and I've got. And I can assure you, especially the star note of 1934A, the $5 star note, is a major rarity. You won't see many of those around. But anyway. Okay, well, I guess